Welcome to The Explainer. So today, we're going to tackle a topic that might be part of your life or the life of someone you know, diabetes. We'll look at how your body's fuel system is supposed to work, what goes wrong, and, this is the big one, what you can actually do about it.
Okay, let's start with a really simple question that's going to frame this whole discussion. Think of your body like a high-performance engine, right? And sugar, or glucose, is its fuel. So what happens when that fuel delivery system starts to break down?
Well, the medical term for that breakdown is hyperglycemia. It sounds complicated, but it just means high blood sugar. And that right there is the heart of diabetes. It really boils down to two main problems. Either your body isn't making enough of this key hormone called insulin, or the insulin it is making just isn't working right. It's either a supply problem or a communication problem.
So as we dive in, you're probably going to see this blue circle pop up. It's actually the global symbol for diabetes awareness. It stands for unity in this worldwide effort to support health and, find some real solutions.
All right, here's our game plan for this explainer. We've kind of touched on the what, now we'll get into the main types, unpack something called insulin resistance, talk about risks and how it's diagnosed, and then we'll finish with what's arguably the most important piece, prevention and self-care.
Okay, let's jump right in. And the first thing you absolutely need to know is that diabetes isn't just one single thing. Not at all. This slide does a great job of breaking down the two most common types. So over on the left, you've got type 1. Think of this as a production problem. The body's factory for insulin just shuts down, or close to it, so you have to get it from an external source, like injections. Then on the right, there's type 2. This is the one you hear about most often, and it's a totally different issue. It's an action problem. The body is making insulin, but the cells are basically putting their fingers in their ears and ignoring the message.
And there's actually a third key player here, gestational diabetes. This is a unique situation where high blood sugar pops up specifically during pregnancy. The levels are definitely a concern, but usually not quite high enough to be called full-on type 2, which puts it in its own special category.
Okay, now let's zoom in on that idea of insulin resistance, because this is the real engine behind type 2 diabetes. And it's not just one thing breaking, oh no. It's more like a domino effect, a vicious cycle that just keeps feeding itself.
So let's walk through how this dangerous cycle gets going. It might start with just a genetic predisposition. But then, if you add something like obesity into the mix, that underlying resistance gets way, way worse. Your body freaks out and tells the pancreas to work overtime, pumping out tons of insulin. This leads to both high blood sugar and high insulin levels, a double whammy. And all that extra insulin floating around, it's not good. It can lead to a whole host of other issues, like high levels of fat in your blood and high blood pressure. And that, unfortunately, is what really cranks up the risk for serious stuff like heart disease and stroke.
All right, so we get the how and the why now. Let's shift gears and look at the who and how, as in who's most at risk and how do doctors actually diagnose this? Because knowing where you stand, that's the absolute first step to taking back control.
Okay, there are a few key things that can give us a much clearer picture of someone's risk. Things like your age and whether it runs in your family, well, you can't change those. But other big ones are totally about lifestyle, like not getting enough physical activity. And this is really interesting. Having had gestational diabetes before, or even just giving birth to a larger baby, say over 4.5 kilos or about 10 pounds, can be a major clue about your future risk.
Now, the good news here is that getting a diagnosis isn't some big mystery or a guessing game. It all comes down to the numbers. There are really clear, specific blood tests that tell your doctor exactly what's happening. Let's look at the three big ones.
First up is the fasting glucose test. This is where you don't eat for at least 8 hours, and then they check your blood. If that number comes back at 126 or higher, that's a major red flag for diabetes. You can think of it as your body's idling sugar level, when there's no food to process.
The next magic number to remember is 200. If you get a random blood test, doesn't matter what time of day, and it's 200 or more, that also points straight to diabetes. That same number, 200, is the threshold for what's called a glucose tolerance test. That's where you drink a super sugary drink, and they see how your body handles it. It's kind of like a stress test for your whole insulin system.
So, those first two tests are like snapshots, a picture of a single moment in time. But the HbA1c test, that gives you the whole movie. It actually measures your average blood sugar over the last 2 or 3 months. It does this by looking at how much sugar has glommed onto your red blood cells. If that number comes back as 6.5% or higher, that's the cutoff for a diagnosis. Okay,
And this brings us to what I think is the most important part of this whole conversation. We've gone through the problem, we've gone through the diagnosis, now let's talk solutions. Let's talk about what you can actually do to take control of your health.
And please, whatever you do, do not underestimate the power you have here. Look at this. For people who are in that at-risk group, making simple lifestyle changes, we're talking about diet, exercise, can slash their chances of developing type 2 diabetes by an incredible 35 to 50%. That is huge.
And I love this quote because it just nails it. Self-care doesn't mean you're left to figure it all out alone. Not at all. It means you are taking full responsibility, but you're doing it with your medical team. You're the one in the driver's seat, but they're the expert co-pilot helping you navigate.
So what does that actually look like in real life, day to day? Well, it's really built on a few solid pillars. First, you got to know the symptoms of both high and low blood sugar. Second, you have to monitor your glucose levels regularly. You need that data. Third, and this is critical, you have to stick to the plan your doctor gives you. The diet, the medication, all of it. Maintaining a healthy weight is part of that. And for some people, it also means getting comfortable with self-administering insulin, if that's what's needed.
Okay, wow, we have covered a ton of ground. So let's just take a second and boil it all down to the absolute key takeaways. If you look at it like this, it all becomes pretty simple, right? The problem? High blood sugar. The cause? Well, that depends on the type, but the solution is pretty universal. It's all about lifestyle changes and really active self-care. Your job is to know the symptoms, understand your own personal risk factors, and then partner up with your doctor to make a plan. And really, at the end of the day, that's the whole point. The stuff you've learned here today, that knowledge is your most powerful tool. It's your first line of defense when it comes to either preventing this thing or managing it effectively.
And hey, one last thing to keep on your radar. November 14th, that's World Diabetes Day. It's a really important day for raising awareness, for education, and for supporting everyone who's affected by this.
So we're going to leave you with one final thought to chew on. Your body is talking to you all the time. The real question is, are you listening to what it's trying to tell you? Because tuning into that conversation is the very first and maybe the most important step you can take to be in charge of your own health. Thanks for joining us for this explainer.